And welcome in, everyone. It is another edition of the Bird Reboot Podcast. I'm Blake Murphy, joined as always by Marcos Labrada. You can find and follow the show on Twitter at Bird Reboot. And Marcos, we are talking about another Cardinals loss today. Arizona goes and is unfortunately now, I believe, 2-8 on the season after that one win with Kyler Murray. I should say it's week 11, so 2-9 on the season. Back to that number 2 overall pick in the NFL draft. It was a competitive game with a lot of back and forth. Cardinals had a chance to win it at the end, but you can't help feeling disappointed, especially in the offense, given that they had 3 takeaways from CJ Stroud. They were not able to score on any of those interceptions. I believe they did fumble it to the Texans at one point on an exchange. At the end of the day, you end up against a bad Houston Texans defense. You got to be able to put up more than 16 points. There was a couple of field goals, I should say, not free throws. Some of them would have been probably free throws, at least from an NFL standpoint. And a lot of criticism and questions going on to the 4th and 3 call that the Cardinals had made. Marcos, what was the biggest impression you took away from this game, as Kyler Murray is now 1-1 as the Cardinals quarterback on the season?
I told everybody, like, when he comes back, it's going to be like a little bit of like getting used to this new offensive structure and philosophy and whatnot. And it wasn't going to be a case where, hey, we're going to go and we're going to light it up. Like just think about how the fields have been. So last week they won. And what were people thinking about? They were on cloud 9. They were saying, you know what, we got our quarterback back. And, hey, everything's going to go great. He's probably going to win us another 4 games. After this loss, now people are completely opposite. They were like, whoa, there's some question marks about it. And then that's my issue with how we handle it. Unlike the black and white media that we have, where we're just like up and down like this, when we're supposed to be even keeled. We're supposed to look at this from a straight trajectory, and we're trying to follow to see if it goes up or if it goes down, but not like, hey, we're falling off a cliff here, or hey, we're launching into space. Like, guys, like, it was a game that was like, there's a lot of things that I saw that I've seen before when it came to like what's going on and whatnot. But I'm looking for those small little situations where I see, oh, look, there's some growth right here. So we were doing some film study right before we came on, and I noticed like his throwing motion, that I didn't really notice until just now when we were going over like the cover 0 snaps and whatnot. And like that was a kind of a long looping type of motion and whatnot in a pressure situation. So that's something that I'm going to pay attention to. But one thing I will say that I did like, I think this is part of the first snap or part of the first series, or maybe the second series. Did you see the play action under center play? So one of those snaps.
Yep. Well, you're reviewing that right here. This is the first snap of the game for Cardinals offense.
Like, his footwork was better. I think this is just a small. Yeah, this is the pass to Trey McBride on that. There was another snap that he had where he completed it to Greg Dortch, who had a really great game. And I'm tired of not seeing enough snaps from him, but his footwork was getting better there. And the way he sold like the fake, and on that one, he had the ball extended with his left hand instead of doing it with his right. Left hand, settled in, took his little hop, and then he completed the ball down to Greg Dortch. We'll find it somewhere in here, but it was a great snap, and I just wanted to highlight that snap as it like, hey, that's getting better. So that's what you look for when you're doing evaluation. So we'll see if I can.
It's a beautiful screen, at least. Trey McBride had another good game. It wasn't, I think, the same elite, but obviously it's not every day you can have a tight end go for 100+ yards. They were definitely missing Michael Wilson in this game. I think this is a good example of some of that under center play action you're able to see. You can also just see how quickly and immediately guys like Will Anderson were able to make an impact in the backfield. That was one of those players that so far he has not gotten a lot of sacks this season. But you can see at least just the pressures that he's been able to generate. There was a lot of good snaps back and forth between him and Paris Johnson. And of course, you got number 52 up on the other side, but right there you can see how the Cardinals end up going into that with the protection for Kyler, where it ends up drawing, I believe it was their left, was it the left guard that was there? No, it was, I think Will Hernandez is 61, unless I'm mistaken. But yeah, that was one. Oh, no, he's 76. What am I talking about? Yeah, they bring a man who comes over to pull, so that's their left guard, and he's not really able to do as much. They can get that affected. And that's something that I feel like is a weakness for the Cardinals that we've seen is they're moving the left guard over to this side to try to get an extra body on Will Hernandez. They already have their blocking tight end and Jeff Swaim over there. And the idea is you're trying to have two guys get in front of him with Kyler Murray, and he still gets there. So, like, I think the story of the game, at least from what I saw, was a lot of people said, oh man, Paris must have had a bad game because look at how Will Anderson went off. And then you look at and see plays and you realize, okay, when Paris was on Will, he actually had like reps he won. There were reps that he lost. There were some where he just didn't let Will get anywhere close to Kyler Murray. There was like another few reps where he got pressure but didn't sack him. And when Will Anderson ended up getting lined up on other players, that was where I think we saw a really big adjustment, at least from the Cardinals, of trying to stop him, and they were not really able to. One of the ways that they did do a good job, I think, of helping themselves was in the run game. When they were handing the ball off to James Conner, you can see here they're running away from Will Anderson on this opening drive. They did a really good job of being able to take advantage of some of those holes, getting James Conner just to be able to run across the rest of the formation. This is really kind of fun to watch because you can see that with how Will Anderson just gets right there, there's no one nearby for him to actually pick up or get in the run game. That was one thing I thought was really smart about the Cardinals game plan. The Texans, you have to credit some of the adjustments I think that they made. We'll get into kind of that end game scenario, but I feel like the biggest thing that we're looking for as far as progress in a lot of ways is plays like this from Kyler Murray, being able to be protected, standing tall in the pocket, being able to read the defense. And we can also see, at least at the beginning of this play, it's not just Kyler Murray. There's also a read that Greg Dortch is able to make here too. So you can see that he's got his hand out to make the adjustment. He's got off coverage from Derek Stingley Jr. And then we talked about this, I think, pre-stream. You can talk a bit more about like how the safeties are rotating here and how that's able to help free up Greg Dortch deep.
We're trying to like break down what was going on over here because you see him kind of like he starts in press man and then he like kind of bails and he has eyes on Hollywood Brown at the top of your screen, but he just still bails to deep. So this could be like a quarters coverage being disguised into like a cover 3, because if you see 3 DBs bailing to their top thirds or their like deep thirds and whatnot.
Yeah.
After this, you see how it's rotating. Now you have 3 defenders on the deep side. So that means you have less defenders obviously deep. So when you're going deep on that situation, you need a Rondale Moore to win his one-on-one. So he, I don't know what Derek Stanley was trying to do, if he was trying to put hands on Rondale Moore so he could feel the route, but being off coverage that far off, that's more of like a press man coverage technique, not an off-ball coverage technique. So he whiffs right here, and he just leaves him wide open on that.
It was a spot where he put the flagpole out, which is something, not to say I'm open, but like he put the motion to say, hey, we've got some off coverage here. And like you said, it's off coverage look where your goal is to try to stay back and take away the deep ball. But like you said, either he bites and thinks that it's going to be going to an out route of some sort, or he essentially just trips on this play. Kyler Murray's able to actually see it. You can see on the replay now he runs inside and he just kind of falls over. I think that he just didn't expect that Rondale was just going to be able to turn through. And like you said, if he's closer, if this is more closer to press man, you can get hands on the guy. He just does not and falls over. Rondale just kind of runs it past him. And like you said, as far as the safety rotations, they bring the one safety down, drop the other cornerback back into coverage. I think this is a corner. The whole entire play is supposed to be where you've got these essentially mismatch where you got 4 guys out here, you've got other guys in coverage back on this side. And most of the time what you'll want in this type of a coverage is you've got to have to just take that pass play to James Conner. Now, clearly, run game that they have, this is about 2nd and 2, 2nd and 1. You're probably going to either be close enough to get it on 3rd down as a run play where you can take a shot if you want to. I think that's something that's super helpful in this scenario. Kyler, once he recognizes that Stingley's falling down, he immediately just goes and throws it up over the head of the safety. One of the rules that they have in the NFL, and this is something that the Cardinals, Jonathan Gannon preached and said, we've got too many guys getting behind us. So you see they're both biting down on the inside, that they're going to run it onto the inside routes, that they're going to run across the field, that they're going to try to run. It's not a mesh concept because it's that far enough downfield, but you're kind of talking about being able to run some crossing route, probably more of like a scissors concept, at least there.
It looked like a flood concept.
Yeah, I think you're right about that being the flood, yeah. But they've got right here, it looks like that they're going to try to run 2 guys to that right side of the field, and instead, Rondale just is able to take it up north because the safety, look at where he's watching here, he all of a sudden takes a bad positioning, as too slow getting his hips around. Rondale's already gone by then. Great throw from Kyler. especially from the pocket, because it's not that this is a wide open, clean pocket throw. Like you can call it a clean pocket throw. But this is a play in which Kyler Murray, you can see right here that he's got someone coming right toward him with number 93, stands tall in the pocket, doesn't bail, is able to just lift it up over his lineman. That's a huge progression from, I think, what we've seen in the past, where normally in this type of a situation, Kyler sees this guy running here. He's going to want to try to bail the pocket back out into the right. Or flip his body backwards and go toward this way. Yeah, instead he's got a throwing window. He trusts the protection to be able to hold up. He just takes a few little mini steps back to get room, and it's a beautiful little touchdown pass. That's one of those things that when you're talking about, hey, like the Cardinals using this for evaluation, is Kyler still progressing in this offense? That's one of those plays that's translatable as an NFL throw, because you're not going to be able to have a wide open, clean pocket in front of you all the time. That's about as clean of a pocket as you can get, and he's able to take advantage of the guy falling down and the safety taking a bad angle and hit Rondale Moore for the deep pass and play. This is the end zone angle you get to look at as well, which I think is super fun to see, because you get to watch just how Kyler's reading the defense with everyone staying in close. He reads that the guy has fallen down, and it's not like he gets the whole arm into it. It's not like this is a direct throw. You called it a moon ball when we were talking, at least. Yeah. So he just kind of is able to look at that, float it up, gets everything into the ball, and the arm strength he has just to flip it downfield. Super impressive there by Kyler Murray.
I just noticed some other interesting that happened with that play. So I think they were doing a zone replacement with the corner who was supposed to bail to the third. He was reading Hollywood Brown breaking into that inside dig. You know, he was doing that like that inside route, and the safety was keeping an eye on Hollywood Brown. There we go. Like right here, you slow it down. See how he took like a little bit of a half step inside to try to cover Hollywood. That's what you call zone replacement. So he's replacing his deep assignment right here, the corner. He's pointing at him saying like, there he is. And then he took a half step, which gave him enough, like doing that took him out of the possibility of having to cover Rondale Moore deep right there. See, he has that little hesitation. He's getting pointed at like, hey, they signal to each other. They say like that's him. The reason why they do something like that is because that's a better angle for him to be able to cover Hollywood Brown if he's getting the ball. Yeah. So like that's the reason why they were able to take advantage. This was all on Derek Stingley. Derek Stingley dropped the ball here, basically. Like that.
I think it's a combination of both a great play design and route from Rondale Moore. It's also, like you said, the technique in the beginning is where the entire play goes wrong for them. Because you have Derek Stingley essentially tries to get hands on Rondale Moore while he's not in a press type of area. So that's the first place that goes wrong. He whiffs on him, and then the safety, of course, like you said, because of the play, ends up missing him. My guess, ultimately, is that this probably is a play that was designed to go to Hollywood Brown, and when the corner fell down, Kyler just hits the other guy, which makes sense. Like, he's probably having to go for both of them. Hollywood's wide open here in the zone coverage. Instead, when Stingley falls down, you realize, oh, hey, I've got a one-on-one matchup deep outside, and the corner just turned his hips the wrong way. That's something that's really kind of fun, at least, is like, it's not to say that it wouldn't have been incomplete, but it just shows that when you can be aggressive and recognize those things on the field, and Kyler's able to process it, boom, right there, you realize he's fallen down, and then just tosses that ball up. Just like kind of those old Christian Kirk catches over the shoulder of old, they're able to go and get the touchdown, put 7 on the board, versus just taking the easier pass play over the middle of the field. Good job overall, and definitely progress that we wanted to see from Kyler. Real quick, we got a comment here from Cardinal Rollers saying, hi, gents. Hey, good to talk to you at least as well, Joe. Thanks for tuning in. Let's go and move. Oh, go for it. What were you about to say, Marcus?
I found the play, so go ahead and put it up for the what's it called, the under center play action snap. So this is the one I was talking about. So you see the formation, obviously. I'm sorry about how the screen is. I didn't pull it up from NFL Plus. I pulled it up from the actual NFL site. So with this is I'm just gonna show the sideline angle, and it's not gonna have the end zone angle, because then I'd have to go into like switching into those options. It's gonna take too long. So back here, you see the formation. Obviously, you see you have like your 2 tight end set to the very bottom. They're either releasing or they're blocking. Single back. You have your 2 wide receivers at the top. And I love how Greg Dortch runs this route over here. So take a look at Kyler Murray's footwork. This is impressive right here, where he's getting to learn and how he's selling the fake right there, and then the ball comes out. that's standard right there. There's nothing exciting about it. But this is what I mean about growth. Like, he's doing it right with selling it with his left hand, getting off his back foot, and releasing on time. This is on time. This is what you call on schedule throws. And this is the type of stuff that he's supposed to learn if he's gonna be under center, and he's gonna be getting the groove of being under center, and executing this play to the best of his ability. Because when he's going off his back foot on schedule and on time, that's when Greg Dortch is breaking it open. He's breaking open into that little window, and he's hitting them for that. I think it was like a 17-yard gain. So this is what I mean about progress. This is what you need to look at when it comes to like seeing how he's learning this system. And I mean, that right there, that's textbook on how to run that. So that's the end of the play, and you can go ahead and take it off and whatnot, because I'm not going to.
Yeah. Great placement throw, great timing throw. There's just, like you said, it does show, at least for the most part, that it's not like he's taking 4 or 5 steps back, taking more. It's very precise. Obviously, there's been work that's been put in there. It's something that I think Cardinals fans are wanting to see. Now, I think that the biggest thing from the offensive side, and a lot of it comes down to the offensive side of the ball, we can say didn't kind of pull up some of their weight, and a lot of that was whether it was situational football, fourth down. Dortch obviously didn't quite go past the sticks. For the most part, I think I've seen some people who went, oh yeah, that's why he's not playing. I think it's less about that and more that this is a Cardinals team in which it's going to feature Hollywood Brown because he is ultimately your best route runner and best receiver that you have. You're going to also recognize that you're going to want Rondale Moore, who's in the contract situation, who's actually got a lot of that burst and speed to be able to line up and kind of be like that main slot guy. And normally you'd want to have Michael Wilson in there for size. So as long as you're going to be kind of featuring Hollywood Brown and Rondale Moore, which is part of what's left over from the Steve Keim administration of those smaller guys, you're going to have your big target be Trey McBride if you're not going to have Michael Wilson out there. And I felt like that he was missed on a couple of plays, especially later in the game, as we'll be able to go over. That was just something I think for Cardinals fans that was kind of unfortunate to be able to look through, as far as with how the protections lined up late in the game. There was just some plays where the Texans were able to make good plays. Kyler made good decisions, but at the end of the day, a few untimed penalties. I think they had a holding call that popped up. There was probably some contact that wasn't called on a play. And we can go over that here in a second. But I wanted to talk also about on the defensive side of the ball, because Cardinals gave up 333 yards of first half offense. And the only reason why it wasn't more was the interceptions in the end zone. Arizona was able to pick off C.J. Stroud 3 times. He had only 2 interceptions on the year thus far. And some of it was being able to have good defense where he threw the ball. Arizona made great plays on the ball. Some of it was just kind of the factor of they probably would have scored more points if they had a run game. Dameon Pierce wasn't there. Cardinals did a good job of bottling up the run, dropping back and playing zone. And that's really that defense kept the offense in the game. The offense just wasn't able to take advantage of those opportunities.
Oh, yeah, it was bad when it came to like yardage wise, that's for sure. It's concerning, but when you get those turnovers, it kind of negates everything. So that's what happened. They came up with the plays that they had to come up with to be able to hold them out of the end zone, because that's the issue, is like if you're giving up all those yards, you have to turn the ball over to be successful. That was my gripe when I was with the Vance Joseph defense. It's just he played where he didn't care about giving up the yards, and he wanted to have his defense be more condensed, like in the red zone, because it's easier to defend and then come up with plays. But like that didn't come as often as we would want it to be successful. So I think like one of the plays you can kind of say it's the wide receiver's fault, but 2 of the plays were very good defensive type plays where Antonio Hamilton read the out throw and he picked it off because he broke on the ball. And then of course that one by Jalen Thompson was just like, he didn't see him down underneath. So he was playing a very, very good, like he was he was reading the quarterback and he read it to perfection, where he was able to intercept the ball in the end zone. So you have those plays that gives you a big break. That gives you the ability to be able to like be more lax on offense, obviously. And of course that they didn't punch it in. They didn't take advantage of any of those. That's the disappointing part that we're all talking about.
No, for sure. Yeah. Cardinals endgame scenario. Let's get into some of this now, because despite everything, the Cardinals really gave up all those first half yards. They only gave up 86 yards in the second half. A lot of it was some of those interceptions while the Texans were driving. Antonio Hamilton catching that one on the sideline where he just extended his play, ends up coming down, lands on the leg. Doesn't seem like he'll be out for the entire season from what it sounds like, but there definitely is going to probably be at least a strain that we've seen happen. Like Ifotu is having a great game, had a sack in the game. He ends up leaving injured. And the biggest injury of all, of course, Kaiser White. The Cardinals ended up having Chris Barnes step in, and he probably had his best game as a Cardinal. But at the end of the day, at least, they do lose him to injury. Let's go ahead and talk a little bit, at least here, with the endgame scenario, because the Cardinals are driving the ball down. They're at Houston's 29-yard line at the 2-minute warning. And they're able to at least have that short right pass that goes to Greg Dortch for 31 yards from your own 30-yard line. That's able to get the Cardinals in pretty good position. The next thing that they have, at least, is they end up running the ball. I think it was either a short pass or a screen or something like that. And you end up seeing a 5-yard loss by James Conner. And that essentially set the Cardinals back. So it's almost the same as like a penalty or a contact play or something like that for the most part. Here's where then we get to as far as the late game situation for Arizona on the offensive side of the ball. You're at 3rd and 8. You got a minute left. Obviously, the clock is counting down. You have one timeout that you've used. You got 2 left. Essentially, you got enough to where you can throw the ball in the middle of the field. You can run the ball if you want to, go for it on 4th down, still be able to get enough time for the most part where you'll be able to, if you can pick up that 1st down, and then stop the clock while you're getting everything ready, all the chains are moving. You'll then be able to at least have another timeout if you can at least get the ball into the end zone. You can still run the ball then, even if you're tackled short. Like, they're in a pretty good position with the ball in Houston's 27-yard line. So here on 3rd and 8, this is kind of the play that we end up seeing. So Arizona ends up in a spot where they've got 6 men at least over here that are in the box. So you're talking about, it's not quite press man cover 0, but then they do show it. This is one of the plays where people look at and wonder, was Jalen Petrie offsides? And this is part of where the team is getting lined up and set. You can see at least right here, they've got everyone on the line. That means that they're probably going to be blitzing at least all 6 and trying to get there. So what you're going to look for is you're going to have to get the protection side that's undone. They've actually slide the protection left, making sure that the running back's able to take the guy over there on the right with Will Anderson. What I'm looking for here, we talked about this pre-stream, is you're probably going to be looking at either a slant route to McBride over the middle of the field. You're looking probably to see about Rondale Moore. He's probably going to end up running a little out flat. And you have Greg Dortch try to take this guy to go deep and force them to have to kind of come down on him so that you can get that pickup. What they do, at least by bringing in Jalen Petrie, is that Tony Jones has to pick the man up. And so then that means that there's one person who gets a free rush essentially at Kyler Murray. And it lets this play out. But you can at least be able to see here that this is where he doesn't get the ball snapped inside. They end up batting the ball down with that free rusher in his face. That's just one of the spots of where could they have called a flag? They probably could have. Arizona, they can see Kyler's right here. Once he gets offside, he goes, hey, snap the ball. He goes and takes that throw on the comeback to Hollywood on the hot route, and it's a little bit slower or an elongated motion, whether that's the snap or the timing, but you can take a look here. You've got number 48 that's all lined up for the most part. Tony Jones goes to pick up number 5, who's showing that blitz, and Kyler just isn't able to get it over the player's head. One of the things I think we also talked about is if you look at the linebacker, Marcos, you can talk about what the linebacker before we go over the motion and some of the play design here. But the first thing we talked about is, hey, just from this alignment, you should probably run a slant over the middle or run a quick out comeback route to Hollywood Brown. He's got that one-on-one coverage. You then can kind of run, force it like you're going to be able to take that deep shot for the touchdown, come back and get the ball. He would be the hot route coming back. They drop one of their linebackers in coverage, so it's not an all out where it's like, they're showing cover 0 right here. Just man across the board. Everything is lined up here to take away. It's a deep route. Take away everything at the sticks, essentially. And they drop the one guy back into coverage in the linebacker. You'll see at least he blitzes and then bails, which is pretty smart. And then whoop. And now you can see that if there was any sort of slant route over the middle, he's getting in the way of that player. Making sure that they can take that route over the middle. So it was a very well-designed pressure that they were able to get. And at the end of the day, you can talk about just some of what we saw from Kyler here in terms of how the Texans were able to have a good pressure and make a play. And Kyler just needs to be able to get better against the blitz in some of these scenarios.
Sorry, I forgot I was on a mute. It kind of unfortunately like kind of puts film out there to be able to like show how like if you do bring a cover zero look on Kyler Murray, how they're gonna try to see how they're gonna defend it and whatnot. And I had mentioned that like I don't think the play design was all that great because you were trying to help your quarterback a little bit because you knew he had to get rid of the ball. But one thing you did point it out while we were talking about that is that you had that linebacker drop into like the I'm not sure if you call it like a rat defender. I think that means he's a robber at that point, but he's definitely like a hole
Yeah.
defender, as in like he's defending that middle
Yeah.
part. And you're right, he's defending that from like any type of slant coming over the middle and whatnot. It's just kind of like a trickery of like, hey, if you're gonna try to hit that quick slant over the middle, well, we have a defender there in the passing lane that can maybe come up with the play. It works sometimes
Yeah.
it doesn't.
You know what
But
else
yeah,
might
like
also matter too? Let's say
mhm,
that the Cardinals, they're bringing this all-out blitz for the most part, and let's see what happens as far as the bringing the man off of the edge is what they're doing. So they
yeah,
bring these guys here down in the middle. This guy drops back into coverage. You know, there could be also they fake it here. This guy's coming off the end. This guy's coming off the end. Cardinals could have run it with Kyler Murray right up the middle. So
yeah,
they obviously are not able to do that because he's not able to get free or scramble through there. Like they just all line gets beat essentially and for that option. But if that was an option where they said, hey, we're going to go ahead and run it up the middle with Kyler for that, because obviously they're showing man across the board, cover zero. Everyone blitzes off the edge. They just open up a small lane. Kyler runs through there. Suddenly he may be all the way at the end zone with that play. They do a good job of condensing, keeping it where it's in the pocket. He has to get the ball out quick. And then they got someone like here for the slant route. Or, you know, his goal is to watch the eyes of Kyler Murray. If he sees that they are running the slant route, get in the right way of that route, which essentially is what he does. He is able to do a good job of his responsibility, which is, you know, act like you're going to be another blitzer who's coming there and then back up and then stay in the lines. That way, if anyone came back inside, at least for off of those routes, he was watching, seeing where they were going. It's a good play. But the biggest thing also we talked about is sometimes when you're a quarterback, you have to be able to recognize you got to get the ball out quick. You have to sometimes take a hit. And sometimes when you've got a shorter quarterback, guys are going to get their hands up and be trying to knock that ball down because of the throwing angle. And that's something that happens here.
yep, absolutely. And that's exactly how they try to defend him. And I think it was on this game because they batted, I think it was a total of like 3 balls. I'm not 100% sure, but if they don't get to the quarterback, they're taught to try to time it so they can put their arms up, not only to be able to like take away the vision of the quarterback for any type of throws that he's throwing. That's what they've always done to him. They try to get big on him when they know they can't get to him, just because they want to try to bat the ball down or make it so that he can't read what his wide receiver is doing. But you saw that like they don't get to him. Just the Dikembe Mutombo, like, come on, man, we gotta. Or it's more like a volleyball block. You know how the volleyball players jump up right across the net and they just like boom, they knock it down. So it's like a volleyball block, in my opinion.
Exactly. Alrighty. Let's also go over the last play of the game, at least that we're able to have here. So this is the one, at least, that was batted down from the line. You can see the end zone angle. Let's go ahead and I believe the next one's going to skip right to this 4th and 8, which of course is a situational football play where this is a game on the line. 35 seconds are left. You essentially have to get a first down here. You're either going to be taking an end zone shot, trying to get to the sticks. There's a couple of different options that you can have. It's just, this is also a 4th and long. It's a difficult situation to be in for Arizona. Here, they end up having, you've got 6 guys on the line. You can obviously see at least you've got pressure outside. You want to look for where Will Anderson is. He's obviously end up right here with Paris Johnson. And then you've got 3 guys over here with, I believe it's a 2-man route. You've got the one running back in the backfield to help protect. And you get Rondale on the other side with off coverage. You're trying to get back. Everyone's still playing back at the sticks. Your goal is to try to keep everyone in front of you, make sure that you're not going to get ahead of it. And here, the Texans show at least another blitz again. They drop the safety down at least again to blitz. And you can at least see here that you've got a mismatch where Paris Johnson, everyone's sliding the protection left for the most part against that blitz. Tony Jones is looking over to the right. And you at least have that where there's 2 men that are rushing there. Will Anderson gets in a hit on Kyler Murray. The ball is slightly under, maybe you could say underthrown a bit, but on watching the replay, we noticed and said, hey, like, he got the ball that was right there for the route. He got it off before he was hit, and that's a pretty well-placed ball overall when you consider how much duress he was under for it to be right there where Hollywood could just drag his toes and get it in. It was a pretty impressive throw that unfortunately isn't going to be remembered as much just because of that's just how it goes. But you can see right over there, as far as the play, the defender is able to get one step in front of him. And at the end of the day, it's ultimately a great play by the Texans. They brought a pressure. They still dropped their linebacker back over here into coverage to take away anything underneath. Man's traveling with him. If this was a receiver who was 6'2", and obviously this is part of where I think missing Michael Wilson comes in, we noticed instead of the play, hey, it's more of a spot throw. It's not like he's playing to come back to the ball, but I think of last week with Trey McBride, he underthrows the ball. McBride comes back to the ball, wrestles through, gets the catch. Here you got a shorter receiver. He just has to be able to get that separation, get there on the sideline, and the cornerback is able to keep up with him. Gets a hand on the ball, full extension play. Like that's what we'll get to see here on the next replay here is just how awesome of a play it is with him getting the full extension. He at least is after he throws it. You can see where he gets basically just in front of it, dives it, gets a hand out to stop what probably was going to be a breadbasket type of catch from Hollywood Brown. Let's take a look at it one more time. So you've got a 6-man look at least for that one with the blitz. They do the same exact play that they did before. The biggest difference this time, of course, is instead of Paris Johnson kind of being on the outside with Will Anderson being able to get the protection, able to fire both guys off on the outside, and Will Anderson gets pressure right there in the face of Kyler Murray. As far as what they were looking for with Paris Johnson, whether this was a breakdown either in protection or whether it was just well placed, they at least slide the protection to the blitzer. It's the same look as last time. They still bring the other man that's coming in off the edge, but you get Trey McBride having to be able to stop Will Anderson, and he isn't even able to get a chip on him. Look at just how quickly he gets off the ball, and he just ends up kind of pushing him right into him because that's just part of the thing about being a great player like Will Anderson. And then, of course, it's a great play made by the DB. Kyler, of course, is under pressure, gets the ball off, and you can at least see him come in front and just essentially dive to get that hand on it. You have to at least at some point be able to say, look, this wasn't the best play for the Cardinals. Here in this spot, you can question, should Tony Jones have actually gone and picked up the inside player who's on McBride? You would have had a free rusher on the outside. Whether that was something that's a protection error or if he's just, hey, you take the guy who's on the furthest outside because we're shifting everything left. I think that that's a possibility on this play. If you look at where Tony Jones goes, he doesn't even look at Will Anderson. He just runs right to the outside guy. Whether it was because sometimes the previous play, maybe he's like, oh, I missed going to this guy on the outside here. I'm not going to miss him again. And instead end up missing Will Anderson barreling on by. This was one of those plays where despite all of this stuff that pops up, Kyler Murray still made a good play under pressure. And we're able to see right here, as far as when the time is hit, the ball was going to be dropped right in the breadbasket. It bounces off of his hand right there. That is still an incredibly placed throw where you have to at least credit the quarterback who had a maybe not game winning because it's fourth down, but at least it would have extended the game a bit further, throwing from under duress, taking a hit. And at the end of the day, you can see here, this throw is going right into where Hollywood's hands are, and he ends up knocking it away, gets right in front of him. Marcos, this is one of the things that I think we have to talk about, which is how is the best way to protect Kyler Murray? Because you need to be able to not just have protection that serve, but you're down to your fourth string running back on the team ultimately. You've got good tight ends that are in there, but getting a mismatch like Trey McBride on a Will Anderson, this is one of those places where ultimately I don't think that there's really as much to blame as far as the specific pieces. I think you can nitpick, but at the end of the day, Texans showed the same blitz essentially twice, and Kyler Murray had a well-placed throw and a ball batted down. And I think, like you said, you're going to have to see teams are now, I think, going to adjust more in these clutch situations at the end of game, putting a bunch of guys on the line and forcing Kyler to have to make a good, accurate throw under pressure, despite having shorter thighs. Do you think that Kyler is needing more protection as far as when it comes to the players involved? How much of this is just the Cardinals needing to get better depth, better starters? Or how much of this may be Kyler Murray's ceiling because of being a shorter quarterback, that there may be some issues that we run into? Same with Hollywood Brown being 5'9" versus throwing the ball up to a 6'4", 6'5" Trey McBride like they did last week, and him making a game-winning play on the ball.
I think it's I think it has to do with just all those so basically all those factors have a little bit to do with it, but it's like the combination of all that. I am interested in knowing who's calling protections out there, because For the most part, I know that the offensive coordinator can go ahead and make those calls, but it's also between the quarterback and the center to be able to see from their perspective which way they should slide the protection. They slid the protection to the left, which means Trey McBride had to do somewhat like a reach block on a defender who can get off the line of scrimmage like extremely fast, and we saw that. It just kind of failed in that perspective, and then they slide protection the opposite way, so that means Tony Jones has to run across the field and pick off and chips or chalk block somebody on the opposite side of the field. I don't know if that's the best call when it comes to like handling cover zero. So they're gonna have to learn that. Kyler Murray still though got the ball out and he threw it in a spot where you're supposed to expect his receiver to come back to it. And this is why I have my gripe with Hollywood Brown. I've been saying it this whole entire time. Like he is not a receiver that's gonna he's somewhere down the field type of receiver. Like, hey, I'm just gonna throw it and I'm gonna trust my receiver to come back to it. Because when we saw that replay off the end zone angle, I was already looking at Hollywood Brown's head tracking the ball and thinking to myself, there's no excuse on that perspective. He's tracking the ball, and if he's somewhat underneath, he's supposed to have the leverage advantage over his defender, and yet he lets his defender undercut him. Why? Because he's not a physical receiver. He's never has been. He's the type of guy that as soon as you get hands on him, or if he's expected to fight through contact or whatnot, he's always falling short. He's just waiting for the ball to come to him. The defender gets under him, and he smacks the ball. That's his boy that he's supposed to be helping, and yet he didn't come back to the ball. And he was getting a lot of flack, and a lot of it is justified because you're not getting daunted the number one receiver on our team and then having performances where you're just expected to have perfect throws thrown to you, where your quarterback needs you to be able to like fix him or like fix his route. If that was someone like DeAndre Hopkins or whatnot, or like a Trey McBride, like you mentioned, he comes back to the ball, he's defended very well, and he is tracking the ball, comes back to it, catches that underthrown ball by Kyler Murray, has his back. So like Trey McBride has Kyler Murray's back, but like Hollywood Brown needs to do better.
And I think I agree with you there. The other thing I'll say too is it may be something as simple as just looking at how the Cardinals were built, especially under Steve Keim. They were without Michael Wilson in this game, so you don't have the big body to throw it up to. They made the trade for a 5'9" Hollywood Brown. And what we've seen with Hollywood in his career, he's good at beating zone coverage, and he is able to get separation on guys, especially for deep, where you can see at least he's gotten that deep separation. And then your hope was that on the intermediate area and those types of routes that he'd be able to kind of get some separation, get open. What we've seen, I think, for the most part, is that he hasn't been an elite separator and he can make plays like this. But I think a lot of this also just comes down to you've got a 5'11", 195-pound cornerback, I believe, in Steven Nelson, who makes the pass breakup. On a 5'9", 175 when wet pound guy, he's not going to be able to fight through that guy coming back into the ball. You mentioned how it did seem like that the other player was able to get in front of him. That's just one of the areas I think ultimately, and it's a big part of the decision for the Cardinals this offseason, because I think a lot of people had issues this week going over, I don't know, the likes, I think it was at Clancy's corner said, hey, like, you can't just take a receiver. There's far, far too many needs on this team. Like, you just can't take another one of those. You just get one in the middle rounds, it will be fine. And I think what we've seen is, I think that if you're going to talk about bringing Hollywood Brown back, and then being able to use the draft picks that you have elsewhere on defense, some people said offensive line, then you're going to be in a spot where I think that you're still going to be looking for, and this may be kind of one of the areas of an exercise. You want to look at, are you looking at replacing a player? Like, you got to get rid of them. Are you looking at keeping a player? Like, this is a guy we're building our foundation on. And then you want to look at, do you need to upgrade a player? And that's one of the things I think you can talk about is, do you need to upgrade James Conner? And the answer is no. Like, we don't need to worry about upgrading James Conner. Do you need to replace him? No. Obviously, he's good. If you want to keep him, you probably will look at a future replacement. Well, you don't need to take that round one, obviously. So that's where I think that with Hollywood Brown, where I do think there is a need, is it's hard for me to see the Cardinals bringing him back because, like you've said, we've seen some of the limitations he has. And I think it's part of why Monty Ossenfort went out, got a big 6'2" wide receiver who's able to get open at the line of scrimmage, and someone who's a big body that you can throw it up to. It's definitely something I think for Kyler Murray that's a need, and it's part of why I don't know if they're going to be looking at it. Before we move on and talk about the kind of the rest of everything else that we've seen with kind of Kyler's ceiling, what did you take away from this game? Was there anything as far as with seeing Kyler's height on the batted ball, seeing at least how teams blitzed him? A lot of people are saying, hey, we're making a grade on Kyler Murray. There was a step forward against the Falcons. Well, this week was a step back. Do you feel like that's accurate, or are we being like a bit too harsh on the quarterback? Or some people even said, hey, like, are you going to be making a decision where these are like the last 6 games you're going to see from Kyler Murray? And I think that's a fair question to be able to ask. And at the same time, it feels like it's a bit unfair to ask in, his second game versus looking at the whole of how he plays through his last 8 games through 2023 with the Cardinals.
That's why, like, when people are making that up and down type of assessment, when we win, everything's great. When we lose, the sky's falling and whatnot. That's why we have 6 more games. So I'm not gonna make my full eval on what Kyler Murray is, because he didn't really change my mind about what happened today or last week as well, because I'm still trying to pay attention to the things that he still has struggles with when it comes to operating the offense and whatnot, and the type of things where he's been trying to get better and getting, that, like, hey, like, if we're gonna run more under center, then, hey, just like that play action, how he handled that's a step forward. So that's what I'm looking for. Um, One of the things that I just want to mention and put out there, because I don't agree with what Alex said. We do need a receiver that can help Kyler Murray, with those type of targets, especially to the outside, big body. Like, I keep saying Marvin Harrison Jr. because, like, that's the perfect wide receiver for someone like Kyler Murray. But I think we need to stop, like, we're focusing too much on tackle. Now, should we draft a tackle in the top rounds? Well, look at how Paris Johnson's been playing. Like, has he been playing amazing? Well, not according to his PFF grades. Has he been playing well enough? Yeah, he has. We obviously are married to DJ Humphries, which is why I was trying to get off of him and get someone like Josh Jones in the building. I mean, not in the building, stay there, because we are, like, extremely, like, not weak, but we're kind of like, what's the word? Like, we're uncertain about what's going down in the middle. Now, you ask people, like, quarterbacks, like, what do they hate the most? Like, pressure up the middle, of course. But Kyler Murray, being the quarterback and the size that he's at, he needs more space to be able to operate in front of him, because the closer he is to his line of scrimmage, the less vision he has. So we need to start addressing that middle part and try to get that at least fixed, or have somebody who's like the type of person that isn't going to be, like, blown off the line of scrimmage, because once that happens and you don't give your quarterback any time, then he has to bail out of the pocket, which is what happens constantly. So we need to start focusing on that middle. Kyler Murray can have things fixed in that manner. Like we just mentioned, for instance, if we have more wide receivers that can track the ball and come back to the ball and beat their guy, that's where Kyler Murray can throw the ball downfield and know that his wide receiver is going to be able to, like, have his back or whatnot. We saw that with AJ Green a few times when he was playing in 2021, where Kyler Murray was just backed up in the line of scrimmage, kept backing up. He threw it to his, like, wide receiver downfield. He won that one-on-one matchup. And it was a great play made, but it's because his wide receiver had his back. Because it's not just about protecting your quarterback. It's also about your quarterback can have all the protection he wants. If your wide receivers aren't winning any routes, the offense isn't going to gel the way it should. And if they're not
scramble drill too. If you're Kyler Murray, you're going to at times be able to have openings where you can move and run around. We've noticed this year he's run for it clutch downs. I think one of the biggest ones that popped up ultimately was you're looking at that third down run, whereas third and goal, he runs all this way down to get it to fourth and goal, and then essentially is able to run the ball in, gets the ball into the end zone. And then on the next play, they weren't able to get the 2-point conversion. Some people said, hey, kick the ball, you're only down by like 6 then. I agree that you probably were, but at the end of the day, you still would need a touchdown, whether it was 5 or 6 points. Whereas if you do get that score, then it would essentially go from, 5 points to adding 2 point on, only a 3-point game, which I think was the correct decision, because you would much rather tie it with a field goal than you would, have to force to score a touchdown. That's why you'd go for it. The question came in earlier of like, hey, when they went for it on the 4th and 3 and they ran a bit short, when they went for it and could have taken the field goal earlier, I think some of it was simply that CJ Stroud, essentially the only thing that stopped him were those interceptions today. Like, Cardinals defense did a good job in the second half, not letting guys get behind them. They were able to mix things up in the front, be able to at least make sure that the Texans were forced to kind of run the football and they didn't have a strong run game. They still were able to get a huge bunch of yards, unfortunately, for Devin Singletary, because that's kind of like just the defense that we have now. We have lost, I think, Lucky Fotu for at least what it seems like, if not the season. He's going to be playing with a cast, it seems like. But Devin Singletary, he had 22 carries, 112 yards, and a touchdown. They essentially did a good job of locking down the passing offense second half. And they said, hey, go ahead and run the ball. And they were able to get those interceptions, which you kind of can't plan. Like, you can't really say, hey, we're just going to go ahead and stop this offense by picking the ball off. All of those were end zone interceptions. And I don't have a fault with the Cardinals wanting to be aggressive, thinking we're going to have to look at this like a Big 12 game. Like, we got to have to put up 35 points today to be in this game. They ended up having a shot at the end of it to be able to win. And I think ultimately what we saw in a lot of different ways, and this is something we can share here, is we've seen people look at Will Anderson and some of the grade and some of the other places that are there. What I think we haven't really seen, and this is something Nate Tice highlighted, was looking at these one-on-one matchups between Paris Johnson and Will Anderson. So we saw Will Anderson just explode past Trey McBride, get that first step. These are going to be like the one-on-one passing reps where you're just kind of leaving him on an island. And when you watch that play, it ends up being that he ends up winning the vast majority of those against Will Anderson. Will ends up getting a few of his. I think there was maybe one later in the game. But if you're talking about like, hey, the Cardinals need to take a tackle with their first round pick, I mean, if you're going to say, hey, we need to replace DJ Humphries, get another offensive tackle here, I think that you could probably move Paris to left. We know he's played on the left side at both left guard and left tackle in college. And I honestly feel like you can move him over there. You could get a mid-round tackle and sign a veteran who's played before. You already have Kelvin Beachum under contract if worse comes to worse. I don't have an issue with the Cardinals' tackle situation because they went out and got a guy who, when you're watching the tape, you're like, oh, this is one of the best pass rushers in the NFL. He doesn't have a lot of sacks, but he's getting pressures. And you're being able to see how Paris is handling him calmly and maturely. It's like, this is an easy checkbox to say, yeah, that's easy to see. He stays healthy, you've hit on that pick. And you've got time for your quarterback. See, like most of the time they put Paris, I even said to someone, wow, it feels like Will Anderson had a great game against Paris. You watch the film and you realize, oh, they moved Will all over the place. When he was against Paris did a pretty good job, ultimately, at least. Like one of those plays there was pressure that came up in his face, but he didn't actually let him, get hit with the quarterback. I feel like that a lot of those people are looking at tackle are saying, we're looking at the talent in that draft. There's two super talented tackles you could get versus looking at some of the needs and the position. At the end of the day, if you want to say we want to kind of build around Kyler and protect him, it does feel like if you're going to say we're going to pay this much money to Hollywood or another free agent, or we're going to take not even a Marvin Harrison Jr., a first round wide receiver, I think that at the end of the day, you're probably talking about at least undoing some of what Steve Keim has done and bringing some of these smaller guys in and wanting to get that big outside threat. And we saw when they got 6'1" DeAndre Hopkins in, Kyler in the passing game did really well.
Yeah, see, the reason why I don't. So Greg Dortch, we saw him have this type of game before, and I'm like, he has more of what Kyler Murray needs when it comes to being the wide receiver that we need that can he can fight through contact. And I think Nate Tice, that's his name. He did my boy Greg Dortch dirty because he cut off the play after he was bouncing off the tackles. I was watching more of that. Yeah, I was watching what Paris was doing, which was impressive against Will Anderson. But then I watched that play. And I was like, oh, there's that play. And then he cuts it off. And I'm like, thanks for that, man. Come on, give him some love because Greg Dortch did really well when it came to just getting that contact and people hitting him and him bouncing off and continuing to move. So when I think about it, I think about Greg Dortch already has what we need in a shorter type of receiver. We don't need him to be the speediest, but we need him to win his routes, and that's exactly what he did. So big ups to Greg Dortch and Mama D for always putting it out there. They're like, hey, my son, he's pretty good. Yes, we know that. For some reason, the Cardinals organization doesn't. So, and that's why we all
too. I'm going to show the grades real quick. At least guess who had the number one grade in PFF, at least for this week. It's pretty easy to guess who that would be. Of course, it's going to be Greg Dortch, at least, with a offensive grade of 77, did his best as a pass catcher. Obviously, people are going to complain about coming up on the 4th and 2. I think that there's areas of blocking, the smaller size. But like we said, when he gets his opportunities, he gets open. I'd love to see him take over that full-time slot role next year and see if you're able to find some move of maybe see about getting a guy that could kind of challenge him in some of the other middle rounds, but letting him being able to get a shot at the slot whenever he has been. And he played, I think it was a season high 46 total snaps for the most part. Um, he ended up really prospering. He had 6 catches for, I think it was 76 yards. And one of the things that also stood out, I think, to me here is you take a look at like as far as grades or other pieces, the tight ends, and of course Carter O'Donnell did not do as well. Paris Johnson, he had a lower grade, but when you watch the pass protection and the plays, you can say, okay, like you want to marry the film to the pass protection overall. You can see at least here that he didn't do as well in some of the run blocking. That's kind of what brought it down. Did a fair job. I believe Will Anderson had his 3rd lowest rated game of the year, but on the defensive side, there's one person who stands out very, very strongly here. Actually, I would say 3 people stand out. Roy Lopez did a great game. Lucky Fotu, before he got hurt, had a great game. That's unfortunate. I hope he doesn't miss time. You ended up losing for the season with a torn bicep, Kaiser White. Chris Barnes had a fantastic game replacing him. He's part of what kept Arizona in that game when they had to bring in their backup linebacker in Josh Woods. He is able to step up in that role. Marco Wilson at least had another miserable game. He had kind of seemed like he'd been staying out of kind of those lower graded games, some of those areas where he was getting more and more burned. We've at least been able to see kind of the last few weeks, unfortunately, like the positive we saw against Baltimore, the positive against Cleveland, okay, like it wasn't good in run defense, but he was at least able to cover pretty well. He had his 2nd worst coverage grade of the season. It looks like it matched that on tape. There were times where he was getting beat overall by Tank Dell and others, especially deep. And a lot of people wondered if he needs to be benched, what goes on with him. The Cardinals don't have a whole lot of depth, and he's had to be out there. But at some point, that becomes frustrating where you'd want to see the team make a move on from Marco Wilson, whether that's in the offseason or now. And it's just truly a place of where, unfortunately, you don't want to bag on the guy each and every week. Like he's shown areas of being able to improve. But at the end of the day, it still is a performance league. And he's essentially having to be trusted to be cornerback number 1 out there. And he just is not capable of doing that. And it's hard to know where you go if you're Arizona, but I don't know if you can continue to run him out there with the high snap counts that he's had. And he even had, I think, one of his lowest total snap count of the season was against Houston, only 50 snaps. And he still was unfortunately able to get burned for quite a bit of time. We will see if the Cardinals will adjust for that, because Cooper Kupp may not be playing, but next week you're going to be taking on Matthew Stafford and a passing attack that's pretty strong. And you want to make sure that you're doing as good as you possibly can. Against a Rams team, because at home you're playing a team that before you start that last 4 games of the year, it's going to be a tough stretch going on, at least between them, the Steelers, and I don't know. What were your thoughts at least about what we've seen with Marco Wilson? Is this kind of the moment where we should look at it and pull the plug on him, try to see what some of the other players have, even putting Keitrell Clark in there, who he's gotten toasted a fair amount of times as well?
I don't know what's going on with Keitrell. Like, even though he's had moments, I mean, he's still a rookie, but he's shown to like have more plays on the ball. So I really don't understand what's going on with him or why he was on the bench. I thought this whole time he was injured. So they're favoring the wide receiver that has more snaps, that has more experience out there over the receiver that like has all this upside, especially when he can play in the slot and become that apex defender. They haven't tried to implement him in that position. They played him on the outside, and they're not happy with what they see. Well, it's like that's not really his game. And you saw what his game was coming out of college. People have been talking about how he would be a great slot receiver. He could push one of those defenders like Antonio Hamilton to go back to the outside and handle that middle part, like that slot part. But I don't know what's going on with that. But I think Marco Wilson either has to be moved off of that CB1 position if he's playing the majority of those snaps against like number 1 receivers, or he needs to be pushed inside, because if you're not going to use Keitrell Clark in the inside, then you might as well just move Marco Wilson to the inside and see what you can do there, because at least he'd have some safety help with the inside. He has a good, I mean, for a cornerback his size, he has a good enough body and good enough athleticism to be able to be like twitchy on those 2-way goes, and he's going to have some help, obviously, with his linebackers and his safeties. So maybe that's what needs to be done. But how's it going to the outside right now, especially being the number one like cornerback or being touted as a number one cornerback. They need to do something with that, like move him out of that position because his confidence is really taking like a hit. And that's one thing about corners. If your confidence is out the drain, you're done. Like you need to have confidence to play the position.
Yeah, and again, the easiest answer is probably they didn't address cornerback with the Steve Keim regime. The corner that they drafted to be their cornerback too, next to Antonio Hamilton, they had to trade up all this draft capital for in the 4th round to get Marco Wilson. And with Byron Murphy and his health and the contract, they just were not wanting to bring him back this year. And it's probably, a lot of people can say, it's probably the biggest need that you would have overall on the team, especially in needing to upgrade from the guys that you have. You probably are going to be looking at moving on, at least from the likes of a Hollywood Brown, is what it feels like. Maybe that changes and shifts. I don't know. We'll have to see. But a lot of what I find interesting, at least, that you can look at is where the Cardinals are positioned for the most part and how they'll look the rest of the year. So rest of the year, the Cardinals are going to be having to play without Kaiser White, who's probably been one of their team captains. I hate to say that I'd call him a stud. It's a difference between being a star, a stud, a blue chip player, like one of those Buda Baker types. He's at least been one of the more consistent playmakers that they've had on that defense. Antonio Hamilton looks like he's strained his groin, was carted off. We haven't heard anything about any tears. So my assumption is that he'll either be day to day, or maybe would miss a week or two. If they place him on IR, it's a longer injury. Lucky Fotu is going to be probably playing through with a club on his hand, potentially, according to Ian Rappaport. He may not miss time. He also would be eligible, they said, for surgery. So we'll see how that will shake out if anything changes. But we can also talk a little bit about just some of the snap counts of this team as we kind of close up before we do a quick look, at least since we've already gone and covered some draft stuff. We'll cover more of that, I think, in our next show that we'll probably try to get up later this week. We'll talk more about that with the Cardinals picking it too. But let's take a look at the snap counts and what they kind of are meaning for Arizona, at least.
So this is where I just pull up, like, of course, because I can't afford SIS just yet, but you saw the first play of the game was essentially under center. The way you obviously read that is when you see shotgun right next to where it says the time, that's, it's a shotgun play. So you have one pass play from under center, and then, you move off to the next series right here. You have one under center play from for a 4-yard run, and that's it on this series. So far you're down to 2. I don't know why it keeps pulling up the Texans part, but this is the same one down here. So you're down to just 2 plays from under center. Not catching anything. Nope. No plays from under center on this series. This interception. No. So you got 2 so far. 1 from run, 1 running play, and 1 pass play.
Yeah, and I wonder how much of that is from trailing, or like we've talked about, you want to be able to see the Cardinals improve enough to a point where they can stay in the game, they can keep Kyler in a balanced offense, and you want to see those under center plays improve, like be able to actually see more of them, to see those progress. And whether it's because the defense has not been capable of it, but they actually had, I think it was 6, I believe it was, snaps from under center in the first week, and like you showed, there was probable situations they could have used it and they did not. That's something I think we'll want to watch the rest of the season, as far as Cardinals went out of shotgun. How much of that was completely the offense with Cliff Kingsbury? How much of this is that we're just overlooking the defensive impact on the team having to throw the ball a lot to be able to keep up in what looked to be an offensive battle? And of course, how much are you going to look at Kyler Murray as far as some of the questions and limitations about him dropping back from under center, if it's better for him to be in the shotgun, if that's where he's most comfortable? Those are all good questions, I think, that we'll have to be able to go and see with the rest of this season.
Yeah, I saw. So basically, this is the reason why I go through this really quick, because that's how like low of a number that they run. It's four snaps from under center, 2 of them being run plays, 2 of them being pass plays, and that's it. And in a offense that we saw at the beginning of the year, and we're not going to go over like those first games because it would be too much to count. We saw a heavy amount of under center action. So this is what I kept telling people about when it came to like Kyler Murray being under center. It's going to be an easement project, but they went down this week as opposed to last week. And we know from actually watching this offense that they do implement a lot of that offensive philosophy where it's like you have them under center, you have all these motions that they have with the quarterback about to snap the ball, turn around, hand off the ball. He's handing off the ball to like a receiver in a jet sweep, or he's just like fake handing off the ball to a running back. So it opens up the run game. Not only this is another thing that's very important to consider with James Conner, like he was very comfortable. Like that's what he ran when he was with the Steelers, was a lot of under center action where he could read the entire defense and he can read from the outside in. When you have him lined up next to the wide receiver, I mean not next to the wide receiver, next to the quarterback, you pretty much have like two plays that you can execute from that situation. See the counter where he's running the same direction that he's being handed the ball, or he's running across the quarterback's body. And when a defense is reading that, they're going to load up to one side typically. And if he's running counter, which is hard for someone like James Conner to run that, not because he can't, but because his body and his build isn't built to be shifty. So he kind of has to like stop himself and then stop his momentum and then take off. So it's not an effective game plan. They need, I don't know what's going on, but we mentioned this before. The difference is Kyler Murray. The snap counts from under center are with him as quarterback. They can run a lot of more run plays from under center with Kyler Murray being there, but I don't know what's going on with this, because if they're running more of a shotgun like run design, then you're pretty much taking one of the best parts of James Conner's game out of there, and you're expecting him to like basically get a running start. Well, he gets a running start when he's under center, but he doesn't have that running start anymore. So you're asking him, hey, you need to take off from a dead stop. So that has to be improved. Like that's disappointing. Even if that was the case, I was expecting at least an increase. So we're gonna watch that the next game. We're gonna see if it increases from there or if it just stays the same.
Yeah, I think that's great. And with that, we'll wrap it up here today on the Redbird Reboot Podcast. Cardinals are going to be playing the Los Angeles Rams. We'll be on to preview that game and also talk a little bit with some more draft scenarios, talk about the Arizona Cardinals outlook for the rest of the season. And make sure in the meantime, you can follow me at Blake Murphy on X/Twitter. You can always follow the pod and listen to download there. I got a few other extra ones I have to catch up on. It's been a busy week with the holidays. Looking forward to some time to watch football and eat some food this week. Marcos, where can our listeners find your content?
You can find me on AZ Sports Underground. You can find me on X as Pancake Soul. Big ups to Joe for being in the stream. Thank you very much, my friend. And big ups to Greg Dortch he's putting himself out there, and let's hope that organization can finally give him the snaps that he deserves.
Absolutely. And with that, we're going to go ahead and sign off, guys. It's been the Redbird Reboot Podcast. It's time for us to log off. Take care, everyone.